Hey friends, it's Alex, the production pastor again. This week I wanted to give you some tips and talk about live streaming worship mixes. Because everything's changed and we're doing things so differently, you're no longer mixing for a room, you're mixing for a live stream or a pre-recording. And with that come a lot of changes. So this week I wanted to bring you 5 tips to help you improve the quality of your live stream worship mix. And I've got 2 bonus tips for you at the end of the video. So let's jump right in. For most of us, we've spent a lot of time mixing live. Well, what do you do when live audio changes completely and there's no longer people in the room? My challenge to you, and the tip I'd give you, is to think of audio now less in the terms of live sound and think more in the terms of recording. And the biggest difference I mean by that is, in general, the difference between live sound and recording. In live sound, there's not a whole lot of extra work you have to do to get things to sound good. Usually, if you put a mic through the PA, it sounds great through any house speakers because you're hearing the natural reverb of the room, you're hearing that person and their amplified audio at the same time. It sounds to our ears pretty natural. But when you simplify that down to 2 speakers, or for many of us, a smartphone, or even 2 earbuds that we're listening through, there's a lot of work you have to do to make your mix sound deep and wide and actually sound like it's natural. And that's the challenge of creating a live stream mix, is making your worship music sound natural and making the people at home feel like they're a part of the experience there. That's really our goal. And so with all the tips I'm going to give you today, they're to help you shift your mind from being in the live sound world, what you know and you've done for years, and help shift your mind into what you could do differently and think about differently to make your worship mix better. And that brings me to my next tip: turn off your PA. So you've probably already done this before, or at least thought about it, but now that there's no one in the room, your PA is really not necessary. You're not amplifying any audio for the folks with you in the space. And so what's best is to actually isolate what you're hearing and hear as best as you can on a separate set of speakers. So if you have a separate broadcast room with monitors, go for that. But if you're mixing in the same room and you're in the same booth and you haven't really changed anything, first thing I would do is turn off your PA and switch to a pair of monitors and or a pair of headphones. Preferably something that will give you still low-end response so you can still hear what's happening in the low end and make sure you're not overdriving it. But that can be a great way to start helping you make that shift, is to turn off your PA. The third tip I'm going to give you is to focus on panning. Panning is not something we do a lot in live sound, and it makes sense why. If you have an acoustic guitar player and you pan them hard left, well, all the people on the right side of the room just maybe aren't going to hear that source. And so while we do pan things occasionally, mostly for stereo channels or some special setups, we typically don't pan things live. However, in the recording industry and the entire world of mixing in the box, panning is everything. Because not only are you mixing levels up and down, you're actually mixing where things sound in the sonic spectrum, in the stereo image. So not only are you mixing up and down, you're now mixing left and right, and you have the ability to place things in different space. And that is a powerful tool to make your mix better. And I've got a couple tips to help you get better at panning if you're not used to it. The first one is you should probably know which instruments shouldn't be panned. In reality, there are certain instruments you don't want to pan at all. Typically, this is your kick, your snare, other low-end instruments. Those really tend to be in the middle. Now, of course, you can break these rules and do different things with it if you're getting creative, but by and large, you want to keep your low-end instruments kind of that solid foundation in the middle. So kick, snare, bass, low-end instruments, keep those in the center. So my second tip for panning is actually going to be panning vocals. And my advice here would be don't. Of course, you can break this rule as you see fit, but really you want to stick to not panning your vocals for the reasons of, what if they're singing and then all of a sudden they interlude and do a speech thing and they're hard left or hard right? It's going to sound disorienting to whoever's listening to hear that jump around. If you do decide to break this rule, here's some advice that I'd give you. And this mainly only works for if you have maybe 4 or 5 vocalists who are in kind of a thick ensemble. This can work well, is instead of panning them hard left and right, is to just pan them ever so slightly off center. This can give you that sense of depth without being distracting. So in general, probably not great to pan vocals, but you can be creative with it if you want and if that helps your mix. And then lastly, my tip is to pan what you see. Since everyone is now viewing everything online, you can actually pan based on what people are seeing. And so while this won't maybe direct all of your panning choices, it can help you make wise decisions for where you should place things in the stereo field. For example of a good thing not to do, say you have an acoustic guitar player who's all the way at the far right of the stage. Well, you wouldn't want to pan that hard left because the person watching is going to think, well, I'm seeing it here, but I'm hearing it here, and that doesn't make sense to my brain. The goal here of upping our live stream mix is to actually make it feel natural and help people not just hear what's happening, but actually help them feel that they're part of the worship experience in the room. So avoiding hard pans that are just opposite of what you see can be a really big way to make your stream mix better. Like your piano players all the way up to one side and your acoustics to the other side, you could pan them separately so it feels natural to the eye as well. Or you could move over other instruments and it will help you dictate how extreme or towards the center you may want to pan instruments. It's just another thought as you're panning and doing different things with your stereo image. All right, tip number 4, run things in stereo. Now, of course, there are some things that you just can't run in stereo, but I'm willing to bet there's many instruments that you already have, that you already own, where you can just hook them up in stereo. So the easy things here to get are obviously keyboards. If you've got someone playing pads, make it stereo. Electric guitars, stereo. Drum overheads, stereo. They give you nice width. You'll also get a lot of hi-hat and ride as you move around the cymbals, will feel really natural. Crowd mics, if you're still running crowd mics, we'll come back to that in just a second, but running them in stereo is a great way to create width as well. And then not on the instrument side, but you can actually run your effects in stereo. My guess is your digital console already is running everything by default in stereo, but if not, check it and see how you can use that and how you can even play with the mixing of, say, a vocal channel and into a stereo reverb and see how that enhances the overall stereo effect that you have going on. So as I mentioned just a second ago with crowd mics, that's actually my 5th tip, is mic the room. It may seem a little counterintuitive to want to mic an empty room since there's no one in there. Typically, a crowd or room or audience mic is designed to really capture what's happening in the room, specifically that engagement you might get with your pastor, or laughter, or saying liturgy together. That's a great thing to capture. But the benefit of miking a room when there's no one in it is to actually capture the room itself. People probably don't realize it. You may not even realize it. But one of the biggest drawbacks and one of the biggest barriers to feeling like someone's there with you worshiping through your pre-recordings or live services is the fact that they can't hear the room. Our hearing is not just a matter of how we actually hear and understand that information. It helps give us a sense of feeling. So if you can help capture the room in any way and use that almost as like a natural reverb of your unique space, you've basically created another way people can feel like they're a part of the worship experience. And so while your crowd mics might be a little different than you normally would have them, I highly recommend you experiment with them. Maybe you have a difference between getting some of the stage volume and some of the noise of the room. Maybe you move them out in the crowd and just get the room itself. Play around with the placement of those, especially now that you're streaming. You can probably put them in a bunch of weird places that you would have never imagined that you could have, but give it a try and see how you can best capture your room and help people feel like they're a part of your worship mix. So that's all 5 tips. It's pretty basic. All these things you should probably already be able to do now. They won't cost any more money. And even if they do, it's just a small amount that you're spending to really enhance your worship mix. But bringing all 5 of those tips together, you can really start thinking less about what you normally do with a live stream or a live mix, and now pay attention to what it sounds like in broadcast. Before we go, I do want to give you 2 secret tips for how to make your mixes even better. And these are kind of stolen from the studio world, and then we adapt them to live. The first tip I want to give you, this secret bonus tip, is actually doubling instruments live. So if you're unfamiliar with it, the idea of doubling is really a studio technique. Because things sound so dry coming through a pair of speakers, studio engineers will take a different take of what you've just played. So say you're playing an acoustic guitar, they'll take another take of that and they'll actually pan those hard left and right. And it gives this nice effect of depth. And so instead of me talking to you about it, I want to actually show you how that works in case you're unfamiliar, and then also show you how we can do that in a live setting. So let me jump into Ableton and show you a little bit about what we're working on here. So here we are in Ableton, and basically just want to walk you through what I've got set up here. So to start with, in this first channel is just an acoustic track. Let's listen to it. Cool. So it's a pretty boring acoustic track, nothing crazy going on here. It's just some finger pick stuff, no big deal at all. So if I was just going to double that in a studio setting, what I would do is would take another take of that audio that I've played at a different time and just put them together, have them play together, pan them hard left and right. So that's what I've done on this next track. This clip right here is the same as the one we just listened to. Here is actually a different take, and all I've done on their channels is pan them hard left and right. So let's listen to that. So you can already hear a little bit of depth that's come in. So here's compared to the first clip. So that's it, mono, and that's what it sounds like with a double for it. Then it goes on, and here it comes to the chorus. So you can hear it. You've got a nice stereo width that takes that mono signal and just splits it to the right. Sounds nice, especially in a big mix. Gives you a lot of width. Now, the problem with this is you can't do this live because you have no other takes that you can use. It's just happening in real time. So is there a way to fake it? And the answer is yes, you can. Let me show you how to do that in Ableton, and then we'll talk about how to do that in a live audio console. So back here in Ableton, what I've done, this is our original clip. Nice and easy. So then what I've done is I've taken and made a second channel. And this is the same exact clip because in a live scenario, you won't be able to actually use a different take. You'll just have the same raw audio. So this right here is the same raw audio. And then all I've done down here is pan them hard left and right. And if you listen to this like it is, that sounds exactly the same because all you've done is basically taken it and split it. It still sounds like it's hardcore in the middle. However, what I've done then is I've taken a delay unit and added it to the second track, which I'm calling the double track. And basically what I've done is instead of using it for a traditional delay, I've jumped the milliseconds way down so you're not really hearing it. It's just giving you a little bit of feeling that the clip has moved over. So let's listen to it without, and then I'll put the delay on as we listen. So here it is, and I'm gonna turn the delay on. So that gives you a little bit of depth. It's not super noticeable, but let me play the chorus for you, and here you can hear it. So let me go, here's the chorus. Let me turn it off. So that just sounds like a mono signal, nothing crazy. Then I hit the delay. Yeah, that's nice. It's giving me a little bit more width. Yeah, that's it. So now what I can do is I can play with those millisecond settings, and I'll show you. If I pull it way up or really way down, it sounds weird. So here's it playing. If I turn it up, it's no longer useful. It's too far apart. Then if I move it all the way back down to like 1, it's close, but it sounds like I put a chorus effect on it or basically just done some phase inversion. So I find that it's helpful once you move up to maybe like 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 6 milliseconds. So I'm gonna put it back here like 5.5. That sounds pretty natural, right? It works. Obviously, there's still a little bit of phasiness that's kind of happening because it's those two parts interacting together. It's never as good as a truly doubled part that's then hard panned. However, because we're doing it this way, this we can do live and we can fake it. So there's a couple ways to do it. You could think about it going to your console and just making a separate send and return channel, sending that to it, just doing a little bit of delay. But that's complicated. That wastes your CPU, which is not really a concern, but it also wastes how many stereo effects you can use. It's a lot of extra routing that you have to do. To keep it simple, I want to show you what I do on our church's Digico S21. So since I don't have an S21 that I own, I'm just going to show you in the Digico S editor. So this is their offline software editor version. Here's just some basic scene that we've pulled up. And what I want to show you is here's our acoustic channel. I'm going to try it to our acoustic. So all I'm going to do here is this is running through mic 9, and then I'm just going to take input 11 right next to it, and I'm just going to open up its preferences and rename this as acoustic double. So now we've got a double channel. Now the next thing we need to do is, so this is coming through mic 9. That's just where you have it plugged in. Just going to do that same thing here, mic 9. And close that out. So now they're both coming through mic 9. Same gain. Obviously the monitor sends are different, but we can adjust for that later. Now all we have to do is instead of sending it through all the returns and sends and returns that you get in an effects unit, I can mess with something that's just the input delay. So on pretty much every audio console, you're going to have what's called the input delay. And basically it works the same way as an output delay. If you have an output delay, say you're adding extra speakers, you can delay them so it sounds natural. Traditionally, you'd use an input delay for things like crowd mics. Say you have some that are out by front of house. Obviously, the signal that's getting from the PA to them needs to be delayed so it sounds natural. That's really what it's designed for, and you use it pretty rarely. However, in this case, what we can do is use that input delay to actually just delay the sound of the acoustic double. And so I want to show you how I'll set that up here. It's really simple. Pretty much every audio console can do it. The only limitation might be how your console treats the input delay. Sometimes they put them in the input section kind of with the preamp and the head amp. And so that may mean that you have the same delay per input, not per channel. And so if that is the case, then it's not going to work and you'll have to use the effects route method. However, on most consoles, and I'm pretty sure we'd be able to do this, they have it here separately, you can see, as input processing. So this is going to be separate than my acoustic channel here. It's going to be totally different, which is wonderful and exactly what I want. So I'm going to open up this delay thing. All I have to do is make sure to turn it on, and then I can just set it where I want it to be. So I had it, and obviously not 36 milliseconds. Remember, this is being designed for about how many feet back you're going to have. And so really what we're looking for is a very small amount. And so we said somewhere like 5.5-ish sounded good to us. And that's how I would set it. Then the last trick would be just to make sure that you've hard panned the 2 channels. Unfortunately, the Digico offline editor does not let me pan things here. Otherwise, I would pan this hard left and hard right. And then it's just a matter of mixing on your faders to try to do that live. And you can go back and forth with playing with the delay time and how that sounds and the mix. If you're getting little phase stuff, you can keep messing with that. If you're getting different audio levels from it, you can either adjust the gain or you could go down and use some makeup gain in like your compressor to mess with that. You can also experiment with EQing it differently per side to give it a little bit more width, especially if you're balancing that with, say, a piano or some other instrument that you're trying to make room for. You can do that all independently, and each of those things will help you get more depth. So I highly challenge you and encourage you to check that out. Try it on an instrument. It works great for things that are groove-like instruments. So acoustic guitars work, pianos can work. There are other things you could probably do it with, maybe drum overheads. It really is designed for any channel that is mono that you want to make it kind of sound like it has a doubled stereo effect. So try it out. Let me know how that works. Now, I do have one more bonus tip that I want to give you, and that is actually using stereo effects. So not just using stereo effects in the traditional way of where I've got a left and right, that's just this whole reverb thing, but actually having an instrument on one side and an effect on the other side. Let's hop back into Ableton and I'll show you what that looks like. So here we are again. And what I've done is I just have this electric channel back here. I'm going to pan it back to 0 and just let you hear it. So it's just this electric that plays along with the rest of the acoustic things that we had earlier. Yep. Cool. Basic electric guitar channel. Now what we can do is we can add that to an effects unit and then just pan them hard left and right. So if you look down here, what I've done is I can actually add it to the send. This will send it over here to my instrument delay that I've set up in Ableton, just like you would use an effect return on your console. And then now I'm just going to pan the input channel. So my input's going to sound here over on the left, and the instrument delay is going to sound on the right. And what will wind up happening is I'll have my main effect, and then it will seem to decay into the other side, giving me a nice sense of width. So let's hear that now. So it's subtle. I don't have it super hard. It's super hard pan, but it's not a crazy amount of difference because I don't want it to get distracting. So that's good, and it gives you that nice little delay tail. But now let's hear it in the mix, because it's by itself, it's not that great. Putting it with other instruments can actually bring the whole thing to life. So let's listen to that in the chorus with these other acoustic parts. Gives you that nice sense of depth as it moves across to that other side. Or actually for you, it would be off to this side. It's got a nice sound to it. So there's a lot you can do with that, and you can really go in, and if you're messing with your delay settings, you can mess with the EQ on the delay again. You could change the feedback so it just goes really long. I would encourage you to try this on, again, parts that maybe it could be a stereo instrument, but it's really good for a lot of washy type things because it gives you the sense that your reverb is moving. And so instead of having like a pad just holding the whole time, you can actually give it a sense of movement throughout the stereo field, kind of like you would maybe with like an auto panning thing. And that can really give you a lot of depth too. And if you keep it subtle, it's just enough where all those layers of depth add up together to really help your mix be even wider, give you more space for everything to fit in there and sound really full. So I hope all of these tips and these 2 bonus tips will really help you think creatively about panning and creating depth and space in your live worship mixes. I would love to hear how these have worked. If you've tried things like this, if you've tried other things, let me know. If you have anything that's worked for you or that really has brought your mix to life, I want to hear about it. Just drop a comment in the comments below, and I'd love to hear about that. Continue to go and make great worship mixes. Continue to be creative in how you're processing audio and how you're thinking and how you're hearing audio. And just keep in mind that the goal of all this is to help the people who are not able to be with us feel like they're a part of what's going on. And through audio and through your mix, you have the ability to invite people into worship. So I challenge you to go try being creative and try helping enhance your worship mix for those in your church. Talk to you later.